I need a voice other than mine to speak.
All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, and to fellowship, and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved.
So that passage, we don't see any mention of one person doing something. So this guy did this in the community, this guy did this, or this woman did this in the community. No, they all collectively came together every time. They enjoyed being with each other as well. And that's why we started our theme, our relaunch with the idea that Upper Room is relational. We cannot carry out the work of Christ if we at first are not together as His people, as a community, as a strong community together. If we're not in relationship with each other on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, it'll be impossible to carry out the work of the gospel of Christ. Because, after all, He came to save us, and He has sent us out to save the world. But the church is being sent out in community, or as a community. Jesus says that just as I have loved you, love one another. This idea of being relational with each other. Love one another as I have loved you. That's the third characteristic. The fourth one is that the church is sent out to every culture. Now, Jesus was, of course, the first example of this. We see in John, the first chapter, that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. This was, I can imagine, a culture shock. But God Himself took the form of a different person, of a different being, us, and came into our culture that is totally different from the culture and kingdom of heaven. And He came out and lived among us and got to know us so that He might be able to minister to us, so that He might be able to save us from ourselves and from our sin. That was Christ. We also see Paul do this. And if you want to turn to Acts chapter 17, this is a good example of how we as a church have been sent out to every culture. Acts chapter 17. This is starting from verse 22. I'll read to the end of the chapter. So Paul, standing before the council, addressed them as follows. Men of Athens, I noticed that you are very religious in every way. For as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines, and one of your altars had this inscription on it, to an unknown God. This God, whom you worship without knowing, is the one I am telling you about. He is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since He is Lord of heaven and earth, He doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve His needs, for He has no needs. He Himself gives life and breath to everything, and He satisfies every need. From one man, He created all the nations throughout the whole earth. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall, and He determined their boundaries. His purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward Him and find Him, though He is not far from any one of us. For in Him we live and move and exist. As some of your own poets have said, we are His offspring. And since this is true, we shouldn't think of God as an idol designed by craftsmen from gold or silver or stone. God overlooked people's ignorance about these things in earlier times, and now He commands everyone everywhere to repent of their sins and turn to Him. For He has set a day for judging the world with justice by the man He has appointed, and He proved to everyone who this is by raising Him from the dead. When they heard Paul speak about the resurrection of the dead, some laughed in contempt, but others said, we want to hear more about this later. That ended Paul's discussion with them. But some joined him and became believers. Among them were Dionysius, a member of the council, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So Paul modeled that same thing as well. He went out into culture. I think sometimes as believers we are scared of culture. We say, oh, we need to be separate from the world because we're not of this world. That's true. We have been set apart from Christ. But the reason why we have been set apart is so that we could shine forth the light of Christ in this dark culture that we live in, so that they might be attracted to it and be drawn to it and come into the kingdom as well. You know, I think there are many opportunities for us, whether it's at the workplace or at the schools that we attend as well. Those are the cultures that we live in. And sometimes we try to separate ourselves, and I think we are in our Christian groups so that we can be together in fellowship, and great. Continue to do that, because I think that's where we find our strength and an opportunity to sometimes be refreshed from any of the trials and difficulties that come our way. But let's not stay huddled together. Let's always remember that there is a culture outside of us that is in desperate need of the gospel. And we've been sent out into that culture. Let's not forget that. In Him we live and move and have our being. That's the life of Christ within us. And I hope that's the life that we will be living in this world as well. That's the fourth description. And then the last is that the church is sent for the King and His kingdom. In Matthew 10, verse 7, it says, these 12 disciples Jesus sent out, instructing them, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. We have been sent out for the King. That's God. That's Christ and His kingdom. In John 18:36, Jesus answered, He says, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world. We as believers, we're here on this earth, but we have to remind ourselves that we have a heavenly kingdom that we are really a part of, that we're really citizens of. So how do we, as residents, as aliens here on this earth, promote that kingdom? How do we go about sharing the kingdom with others? First of all, it's through our lives, by the way that we act in the communities that we live in, and love and compassion and forgiveness with one another. People will see that and they'll say, wow, what a difference that is. I mean, that's something that I'm not used to in my family or used to in my community, and that's something that's different. I want to be a part of that. Do people say that of us, or do they just see us as any other club out there? When they look and peer through the walls and windows of this church, do they see something different? That's what we want. I'm going to have Ben come up, and he's going to share a testimony about how he was sent out into the culture. Just amazing things, great things that God has been working in him, and now he has the opportunity to share with us as a group here at Upper Room of how we can also be engaging our culture, engaging our world for Christ.